Of the Limpopo River, the Zimbabwe government has come under fire for the arrests of several activists and a journalist. The American embassy in the country and South Africa's Cosatu have condemned the arrest of International Trade Union Confederation General Secretary for Africa, Kwasi Adu-Amankwah. He was arrested just 2 days after Zimbabwean activist Rashid Mahiya. Both were charged with plotting to overthrow the government, following protests against fuel hikes earlier in 2019. This flag founder and activist Pastor Evan Mawarire has also been charged. He's due back in court later this month. He joins us now live on Skype. Good morning to you, Pastor. What exactly is going on the ground in Zimbabwe at this point in time?
Well, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I think what is becoming apparent in Zimbabwe right now is that the government seems to be cracking down very heavily on people or organizations that have been involved in helping to call the government out on some of the policies that they have implemented in the last couple of weeks, in fact, last couple of months. Particularly the issue to do with the increase of the cost of living. And so many have been arrested, including myself. When I was arrested about a month ago, we were arrested with many people who were taken from their homes with children. And I'm talking here about 12-year-olds and 16-year-olds who I personally was with in Chikurubi maximum security prison. And it's unfortunate that government has chosen to respond this way to what is actually our constitutional right of protesting. Our protests were actually, when we called the protest, we called people to stay at home. We called people not to be violent, but it seemed government chose to accuse us of attempting to effect regime change.
Pastor, all of these promises of something different than the repression that we've become used to in our northern neighbour, essentially ringing hollow after much hope following the ousting of Robert Mugabe. Is that right?
Absolutely, and I think this has been the surprising and the disappointing thing, and I think that's the word to use, is disappointing thing for the ordinary person. We felt and thought that after Robert Mugabe had gone, the entire nation would at least have a social agreement or social contract that we're going to start afresh, that we're going to do better than we've done before as a nation, both as citizens and as government. We will do better than what we did under Robert Mugabe. But we are starting to actually go worse, which is inconceivable for a lot of Zimbabweans, that we could actually be worse than we were when we were under Robert Mugabe. And this is the call to our government to say that our nation has had enough. Almost 40 years of violence, 40 years of an economy that hasn't performed, 40 years of poverty. Can we not get a break? People just need to earn better, to live better, and to expect a better future in Zimbabwe.
There's been a suggestion from the government of Emmerson Mnangagwa that things need to get worse in Zimbabwe before they get better. Do you buy that at all, Pastor? I mean, has there been any signs of a positive change on the ground in our northern neighbour?
Well, part of what is disappointing or disconcerting is that this promise or this plan of austerity before prosperity, as the Minister of Finance called it, seems to only be one-sided. It is austerity for the citizens, before prosperity, but it looks like our government still spends money buying themselves brand new cars, buying chiefs brand new cars. The travel that our president has done and the vice president has done, the vice president has been in and out of the country getting medical treatment, yet we have our own medical facilities here. It's exactly what Robert Mugabe used to do. The president has been traveling on very expensive airplanes when we have basic needs here at home that needs to be looked after. So it's tough for us to understand this austerity for prosperity when government is not showing that austerity themselves. They are not putting themselves under austere measures to control their spending and to put the needs of the citizen first. So that's difficult to understand and difficult to see it actually as a plan that's going to take us anywhere.
Pastor, economic meltdown has been a running theme in Zimbabwe for decades now. This past week there was a crisis around the value of the bond notes that were issued by the government in place of hard currency. How are citizens able to buy basic foodstuffs and basically operate in an economy that is starved of cash?
Zimbabweans have been forced to operate in an environment where constantly their money is devalued or money is literally stolen from their bank accounts. Every maybe 3 to 4 years. We saw in 2008 when our currency lost value and we ended up with a $100 trillion note. In Zimbabwe, we saw everyone lose everything that they had in their accounts in a moment. Pensioners lost everything that they put aside and had to go back to work. And we're back to that position where over the last 2 years, government introduced another new currency after the US dollar balances we had suddenly disappeared because government had raided the Nostro accounts and suddenly gave us a currency that was backed by nothing. They insisted it was 1-to-1 with the US dollar when it was not. And of course, that crashed. And over the last 2 weeks, government has come back again and introduced another new currency that they call RTGS dollars. And it's ridiculous. And what people have to do right now to keep up with the increased cost of living is to go and find US dollars on the black market, which cost them more to be able to purchase. Essentially, that means that the cost of living has jumped up once again. So we've had to use this electronic money, this invisible money to try and get by. It's backed by nothing. And again, Zimbabweans are expecting that this is going to bottom out and inflation will run away again as it did in 2008. And that is a shame for Zimbabweans and something that we are trying to find a way to make representation for ourselves for, since merely speaking up about it has become illegal. Government actually arrested even comedians this last week, which is ridiculous.
Pastor, with respect, how are you able not to be trapped in a cycle of absolute despair at this point in time? The potential for a prosperous future in Zimbabwe is looking diminished day by day. You're due in court soon. How are you and people on the ground in Zimbabwe able to continue day by day in the hopes that your protests, in the hopes of your attempts to hold government to account, will ring true?
I've often said that when people have lost everything, the only thing that they have left is hope. And I think this is what we have come to in Zimbabwe, where the only real thing to us that we have left is the hope that we will be able to turn our country around. And the realization around this hope is that Zimbabwe cannot be turned around by one person. It can't be turned around by a single party, particularly the governing party, ZANU-PF. They failed to do that for years. And so the hope that we have in ourselves, again, we've constantly said that we cannot subcontract our struggle. We must be involved. Every Zimbabwean has got to roll up their sleeves and be involved in turning Zimbabwe around. And it begins where the voices of the people are allowed to be expressed, where our concerns are heard and we are not shut down like Robert Mugabe did, and guns are not pointed at us as the army has done to us in the last couple of weeks, and even going back to August 1 in 2018. We have to have hope. It's the only thing that we have left. Zimbabwe is our home. We don't have any other place that we can call home. So we have no choice but to have hope and to fight for a better future for ourselves and for our children.
Pastor, the Zimbabwean diaspora has been well documented over the past 2 decades. What is your experience on the ground? Are Zimbabweans that are still in the country and unable to move to greener pastures considering a move, even if it may well be dangerous and harrowing?
You know, it is sad and unfortunate for me to have to witness that kind of a phenomenon, the movement of people from Zimbabwe in mass, purely because of the economic and especially now the political situation in the country. And again, sadly, that has become the option that many Zimbabweans are choosing, either as families to move across or for those that can move their children out to go and get education elsewhere and stay there. That is becoming more and more of a happenstance. And you will know that being in South Africa, being our neighbor, is that there are millions of Zimbabweans Zimbabweans that have moved to South Africa for better life, for greener pastures. And that hurts me as a Zimbabwean. It hurts our country because we are losing our expertise. We are losing some of our best. And not just that, but we are forcing people to leave home and go and live elsewhere simply because the economic situation and the political situation is not in their favor.
We thank you for your time. This flag founder and activist, Pastor Evan Mawarire, live on Skype.